This is Dental All Stars, where we bring you the best in dentistry on marketing, management, and training. Here's your host, Alex Nottingham.
Welcome to Dental All Stars. I have Michael DiFrisco. He's the Chief Marketing Officer for the American Academy of Cosmetic Dentistry, the AACD, and our topic is Responsible Aesthetics, AACD State of the Dental Industry. Please welcome Michael.
Thanks for having me here, Alex. Glad to be with you today.
Well, tell me, Mike, what is going on? What did the AACD discover in the state of the industry, the State of the Union? What's going on, Mike?
It is our State of the Union, and you know, AACD has been conducting this survey for about 20 years now, or it's about half our history, believe it or not, because we're coming up on our 40th anniversary next year. So this is an area where the Academy has established and kind of maintained thought leadership, because we benchmark the results. We observe kind of what dynamics are changing over time in the cosmetic dentistry industry, and not only how it affects the Academy's members, but the cosmetic dentistry industry as a whole. So what's kind of interesting is our last survey was conducted in 2019. We usually do it every other year, but of course we had to press the pause button during the pandemic because we kind of wanted to wait until things normalized a bit. You know, we wanted to prevent seeing a lot of false positives or information that was kind of pandemic focused. So we were really excited to execute this latest survey, which we did in late 2022, because like everybody, we wanted to see, you know, what's changed or even more so what stayed the same. So anyway, what's kind of cool is the Cosmetic Dentistry State of the Industry survey. It's not just sent to AACD members, but it goes to non-member dentists as well. So we can make, you know, some comparisons between the responses. This year, when we did it this year, it was about 50-50 AACD members and non-members, and about 9% of the respondents on the member side were AACD accredited members. So this is where we get some of our data, but it's pretty evenly distributed between members and non-members. And almost all of them are dentists, with about 2% being laboratory technicians. So that's kind of what it looks like right now. We did see something interesting this year. About 11% of the respondents were prosthodontists, and we've seen that steadily growing since 2015 when it was only 3%. So we thought that was interesting. And this one's not surprising, but Alex, you wouldn't be surprised anyway that AACD members are twice as likely to identify themselves as a cosmetic dentist compared to non-members, which totally makes sense, right? You identify with that community of practice that you're involved with. So also, a couple other demographic things that I'll tell you about before we jump into the findings here. About half the respondents to this survey instrument have been in practice for 20 years or more. And we're seeing kind of a continued trend of more respondents saying that their practice location is urban. This year, it was about 51% saying that, with 34% saying suburban, and then the balance, of course, being rural and small town. And finally, what we saw in this latest survey is that the type of practice is staying pretty steady year over year, with about 53% of respondents saying that they're solo practitioners and 34% belong to a group practice.
Very interesting. Now, in terms of the procedures or treatments, how have they been trending over the past year? What, if anything, has changed?
Yeah, so we always ask about what procedures they're performing, what treatments they're performing in their offices. And what we heard this year was the top five in order this time for the 2022 survey was: number one, crown and bridge work. Next was anterior direct bonding. Then we saw bleaching and whitening come up. Fourth was veneers, and fifth was posterior direct bonding. So this is actually pretty consistent with the pre-pandemic survey in 2019, with exceptions being orthodontics, which actually declined among all member types, and veneers, which actually increased by a couple of percentage points overall. We also ask, which procedure do the respondents want to see more of? And this year, what they said was they wanted to do more veneers. About 39% of them wanted to see more veneer treatments come into their office, cases, followed by implants at about 18%, and finally implant-supported dentures coming in at about 9%. But typically what we see when we analyze the respondents by member type and by respondent type is that pretty consistently AACD members steer their patients toward less invasive treatments versus the non-members.
Interesting. Even though they orient towards cosmetics.
Correct. Right. It's less invasive treatments, which kind of aligns with AACD's mantra over the years, which has been all about responsible aesthetics.
Now, what about the patient side? What, in terms of the survey, what is it saying about dollars spent on treatment, and what other findings have you found from the patient perspective?
Yeah. So this is another kind of area where we do some slicing and dicing of when we analyze the data based on who's responding. Is it an AACD accredited member, a general member, or a non-member? And because of their credibility and often their advanced aesthetic training, AACD members, and especially our accredited members, can typically charge more for the same procedures because, they're viewed or perceived by their consumer clients as kind of specialists of sort, right? So average prices reported by members were at least 10% higher for all procedure types. And kind of what's interesting is we saw average prices increase the most among accredited members. They've been going up 22% since 2019, since AACD is really the only aesthetic dental organization that has a credential. So it's clearly a great marketplace differentiator, and it provides that practitioner with a little more credibility in the marketplace so that they're able to do that. Overall, though, average patient spend has increased compared to the previous survey among all respondent types. So it's nice to see, bright spots like that, especially post-pandemic.
What else in the study did you find significant or stood out? So you covered the doctor side, the patient side. What else sparked your interest, Mr. CMO?
Yeah. Well, what we're seeing more and more kind of year over year, we're seeing more adoption of technology, right? So, for instance, AACD members, they use chairside CAD/CAM 40% more than non-members. And what we also saw was that practices using CAD/CAM have higher patient spend. And frankly, we're seeing the same dynamic with digital smile design and 3D printers. So as dental practices embrace technology, they're able to do more. They're able to offer, different treatments, less invasive treatments, and charge more. The use of chairside CAD/CAM has really increased steadily since 2017. So we're kind of seeing that, spike up pretty quickly. When we look at AACD members versus accredited members, the use of chairside CAD/CAM has increased from 37% in 2017, 39% in 2019, and 40% in 2022. So you can see this adoption rate kind of continue to increase. So when we compare AACD members to the general dental population, non-members, we saw their usage of CAD/CAM increase from 24% in 2017, 25 in 2019, and 31 in 2022. So it's across the board, but AACD members are using technology and leveraging it a little bit more. We're also seeing, and I'd love to hear your perspective on this from your clients, but we're seeing kind of CAD/CAM system usage increase in step with the size of the practice, which kind of makes sense, right? Because if you have multiple associates under one roof in a practice and you can share the equipment, then your investment is spread out over more associates. Is that kind of what you're observing as well?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. I leave the DDS to you, the dull dental stuff, to the academies. We focus on business training. Now, my coaches are seeing this in the front lines. So you're going beyond my pay grade in terms of CAD and Of course, technology. Now, the business related technologies, I'm seeing those being adopted. We can talk about that. But from the clinical side, that's why, just for a background for many of those that are listening, we've had a relationship with the AACD for over 10 years. When we launched All Star Dental Academy with Mike DiFrisco, you and your buddy Jeff helped us. We launched together All Star at the AACD, and you all have been wonderful supporters for so many years. And so we just had this vision that we're going to do great on the business side, the practice management training. And when it comes to clinical, it's going to be the AGD, it's going to be the AACD and others that hold that clinical standard. And it's just amazing what you guys are doing and just the longevity of your people and support. And so we're just so happy to be aligned with you guys for so long.
Great. We're happy to have you as a business partner, and thanks for that explanation. That totally makes sense. So as we think more about technology and how dental practices are leveraging it, we're also seeing digital smile design and 3D printing increase in the last couple of years since the pandemic, with 4 in 10, or about 42% of respondents using digital smile design, and about 1/3 of practices using 3D printing. So use of both has increased among member types, but more among AACD members, with digital smile design increasing 11 percentage points and 3D printing about 17 points among AACD members. But again, we're seeing these technologies grow more among the group practices than with the solo practitioners.
Now, you kind of alluded to earlier about the pandemic, and it's kind of shifted in terms of the impact. Now it's more supply, demand, prices. What do you see moving through 2023 into 2024 and so on? What do you see the future of dentistry, of cosmetic dentistry going forward?
Yeah, well, you're right. I mean, there were plenty of disruptions, as we all know, during the pandemic, especially those first few months when there was, so many question marks kind of floating around dentistry in general. But what our respondents told us in this 2022 instrument was, as far as disruptions and things that they're thinking about or concerned about, is the continued growth of DSOs, more corporate dentistry, right? And I know you're very familiar with that, but they're calling that a threat or a disruptor, and they're seeing that grow. The economy in general, of course, higher costs, the availability of support staff. These are concerns that cosmetic dentists have right now, and that was mentioned frequently. So disruptions to the economy was about 12%. And they brought up specific examples such as higher costs that they're dealing with in the office for supplies and consumables, support staff shortages, 7% said that, and that increased the most compared to 2019. So no surprise there. We've all heard kind of the difficulties in securing quality team members. And then, of course, insurance. So that includes like lower insurance reimbursement. That's a big hot button issue that we're seeing right now. Staffing, which I mentioned as a subset of the economy disruptor. So we got all these things kind of floating around the economy, including staffing. And the other thing that we saw was that COVID kind of prematurely drove a lot of dentists into retirement age earlier because of maybe pre-existing risk factors, or maybe they're just kind of throwing up of their hands of, I'm close enough and this isn't worth the effort. So those were some of the pain points that came out of the survey. And I'm sure you can relate to some of those.
What comes up for me is, in terms of DSOs, I have a future podcast I'm thinking about, a title called DSO Doing It Right, or DSOs Doing It Right. There are some DSOs that are doing it right, and there's some corporate practices that are doing it right as well. And what I mean is they're committed to patient service. They're investing in the quality materials. I think where there's the aversion from the AACD is just such a commitment to quality. And we talk about sometimes is that when you're heavily impacted on cost or insurance, you have to use inferior products. And nobody wants to do that. No practitioner wants to do that. So that's number one, is that there are some that do it well, some that don't. And when we say do it well, we mean it's not just a business decision, it's quality and it's good for everybody. The other thing when it comes to hiring, I mentioned to you, we have a hiring service precisely
Right.
for that issue because it has always been an issue hiring. And we built a hiring program 5 years ago. And we just kind of launched it to the public 2 or 3 years ago. But it's been well received because now it's even more difficult. And lastly, insurance. Great timing, Mike. We just
Hmm.
launched at allstardentalacademy.com/freedom how to break free from dependence of insurance webinar, free webinar. So that's very helpful in terms of a lot of dentists don't want to be dependent. And when I say dependent, they can keep the plans that they feel are helpful. But some of these plans, they're cutting 40%. And I know as a marketer, as a marketing guru yourself, how much, let me ask you a question, Mike. How much is an appropriate spend for marketing of your practice revenue? You know where I'm going with this,
Yeah, yeah. I've
right? It's
that's the common question. Yep.
5%, right?
Yep.
10% if you're being really aggressive.
Five to
And
seven is
often,
what I was going to say.
there you
Yeah.
go. And often insurance companies are like, well, it's a marketing expense. Well, A, you think 40% write off is a marketing expense? You're
Hmm.
basically paying the insurance company to work. You're not making money on this. And when you look at the tracking, you find that the insurance companies aren't really sending you a lot of patients. It's you just working with their plan. And often, if you're at a network, in many of these plans, you still can get paid by the insurance company a higher fee. And we teach you how to do this in this webinar. So I'll leave that link both for the hiring and for the insurance as well. And also, Mike, I like to, for those that are listening about the AACD, I like to learn more about the AACD, either the study or more about joining or about your services. Where will we go?
Yeah. Well, just aacd.com. It couldn't be a simpler web address. So aacd.com will kind of give you the down low on everything that AACD offers. I mean, we like to say that, you mentioned it earlier, but we're about aesthetic excellence. We help dental professionals go further, faster with our education, our credentialing protocols, our online learning, our annual scientific session, all those ways that we can elevate the entire dental profession. So that's thanks for mentioning that. Yeah, we'd love people to check us out and see if we're a good fit.
And what's nice about AACD, you get member benefits, right? For example, with All Star Dental Academy, they get discounts and other companies as well. Also, who's the best fit to be a member? And there are different member capacities that you can be involved in, right? Different levels, different interactions. So it's not all or nothing. You even have fellowships. But
Yes.
if I'm not, like, if I'm a cosmetic dentist or aesthetic dentist, of course, boom, AACD. But what if I'm a general dentist? Who is a right fit to be a member of the AACD?
Yeah, I love that question because we talk about it all the time. I mean, AACD is not for everybody. It's for those practitioners who have a fire in their belly to do kind of excellent work all the time. They want to raise the bar. They want to provide excellent patient results. And I heard one accredited fellow say that when they're dealing with a patient, they want to supply perfection in the end result, but they'll settle for excellence. And I thought that was kind of a neat way to say, look, I need the training. I need to understand materials and methods. I need to understand, clinical best practices. And once I understand that better, I can provide better patient results. And accreditation is an option if you want to go through the process of credentialing. Like I said in the context of this survey, that our accredited members, their practices average almost 1.5 million in annual revenues compared to 1.3 million for general members, and non-members about 850,000. So you can see
Wow.
there's quite a delta there once those clinical skills are elevated to the point where you're providing excellent patient results. So there's definitely a monetary advantage to being affiliated with the academy as well. So that's the story that this survey has told us year over year.
Well, Michael DiFrisco, the CMO, the Chief Marketing Officer of the American Academy of Cosmetic Dentistry, the AACD, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Well, please follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. And this way you'll get the episodes as they are released. And share with your friends. Together, let's continue to make a difference in dentistry. And until next time, go out there and be an all-star.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Dental All-Stars. Visit us online at allstardentalacademy.com.